next to the exhibition hall during this upcoming week. Now, I would like also to invite the Saudi Aramco representative to announce about the daily draw they do on the prize, I think, iPad, right? So is Saudi Aramco representative ready to announce about, please? So be ready to receive prizes. It's my first time to hear that there is something like that.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's and we just have a quick announcement.
Yes.
For the introduction.
Yes.
We would like to announce the winner for yesterday's prize through Saudi Aramco. And if you missed putting your name in the box, there's still a chance to win again today. But right now, without further delay, we'd like to announce the name of the winner. The lucky winner is Dr. Butt. Dr. Butt. Is it Alright, we have this contact information over email. Feel free to visit us at the booth and have a chat with us, and you can also drop in your name in the box for a chance to win.
So now I would like to invite Bob Morton, the chairman of the IEEE Council, to participate with us delivering symbolic
That is the opportunity. Apple did not get double-digit growth because of tweaking some internal processes. It was because of some external shocks that happened to their environment that they were able to take advantage of. So while we oftentimes frame this as something to avoid, or frame this as something that is negative, the types of products you deliver, the types of services you provide, the types of people that you hire, or getting access to a new pool of people that you previously could not get access to. And that all requires some innovation. And from my perspective, the realization of this potential comes from the types of decisions we make about HR. So let me ask you guys to do a few things to make this participative. I would ask you to think of a few questions for your own organization. Yeah, we have a question, please.
Yeah, I have a question with utilization actually.
Can you speak up a little?
Yes. How do you promote innovation without compromising productivity? So how do you have the perfect balance where you do not innovation in the company but maintain productivity?
I agree there's this tension between exploration and exploitation, right? Many organizations, we talk about cash cows, right? Or the thing that you do really well right now, that you just want to keep funneling money into. I think every organization needs to set aside a certain percentage of whatever their profits might be for exploration. And if you ever sacrifice that, then you're really threatening your survival, because what we know about R&D and innovation in general is that it's a pipeline. It's path dependent, and you cannot sort of stop and pick it back up where you were. You have to have continual investment. So what the percentage might be varies by industry. And from my perspective, how that varies is based on what do you think the market is willing to pay for that innovation. So the higher the margin associated with it, the more you should be thinking about exploration. Because that's where the big wins come. And the lower the margin of the activity, the less that you can focus on that, and the more it's about exploitation. It's not to say that neither one of those organizations should have any exploitation or exploration perspective. Innovation shows up very differently for those. But I think if you're talking about major breakthrough type activities, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, if we did this, would somebody pay for it? Is it something that actually creates value? And, listen, people pay for things that create value. And I'm a big believer that the firm creates, the meaning of the firm and the value of the firm, or the purpose of the leadership is to create value for customers. If you do that, all your other problems about shareholders and employees and all that other stuff goes away. If you create value for customers, then it happens. And so, what is the true value creation potential of that idea? Well, that kind of determines where I would position an organization. And then what that would mean for me is the type of people that I would want to have in an organization as well. Yeah, please.
Would innovation have the highest impact when it's based on external environment versus internal environment?
I think so. And the question was, does innovation have the greatest impact when it's based on external environmental conditions? My personal belief on that is yes. Because what you're trying to do is there's been a shift in some type of environment. And in that moment when the shift occurs, there's uncertainty from the perspective of the stakeholders as to what to do. And there's also uncertainty in the perspective of the competitors what to do. And the innovation in that moment has to bring us an opportunity for value. So I think that is, you engage in activities that all activities you engage in should be externally driven. And that's another thing I think we in HR oftentimes don't forget, because we tend to embrace the champion role of what's happening inside the organization. And you know what? Your customers can care less. Really. Customers can care less. And by customer, I mean the entities that consume the products, the services, the deliverables. So if you're a government agency, your customers are your citizens. If you're a not-for-profit organization, your customers are the entities that you provide service to. If you are a for-profit organization, the customers are those who pay you. And so they don't really care about what's going on inside. You have to think about that. But the first thing you should be thinking about is what they care about. And so I think when innovation is driven by external changes, yes. And even if you've started down this path of engaging in an innovation process, the fruitfulness of that process will be determined by the external environment. Yes, please.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. Innovation sometimes is trying to be proactive versus reactive, and anticipates changes and prices and difficulties, going your way, trying to develop scenarios where you can moderate the impact of these difficulties.
So the issue is it about anticipation? Honestly, we're really bad guessers. I think many organizations will say they try to time the market, but the reality is, very few times does that happen. And when that does happen, I think that's more luck than anything else. I work with some really world-class economists, and listen, I went to them in 2009. I was like, what happened? You guys are supposed to be like the best of the best. Where was the warning? I'm losing money in the market just like you are. Where was the warning for the GFC? And what we realize is that it's hard to predict those things. So my perspective on innovation is not necessarily about anticipation as much as it's a process. Continual innovation, right? Continually engaging in things such as accumulating complementary resources, combining resources, opportunity recognition. Those are, because it's path dependent. Even if I am not necessarily the first one to the party, if I have a pipeline in which that's being generated, I'll be fine. Because it's not just about the creation of a good idea, right? That's the harnessing part is the harder part. It takes much longer. There's plenty of companies that are first to market with some ideas, but they cannot sustain that position because they can't harness. So for me, the anticipation, the prediction component, there's definitely something to that. But I think the bigger component around this is organizations that have a continual innovation process. They're just continually doing these things of experimentation, so that as things happen in the environment, they have stuff on the shelf that they can pull off and say, this is applicable, this is not. That's, I think, a far more practical perspective around it, because the ability to really predict what's going to happen, we haven't got that science down very well, I don't think. I haven't seen any research that really shows that it's effective. Other questions around these ideas? Yes, please.
One of the great slides about the inspirational leadership and the impact on innovation, and I think you just breezed about, I mean, people don't give it them. I would love to see the study, I would love to see the facts.
Yes. So this was the example I gave from the Taiwanese electronic companies.
Yeah.
And what we know from that research is that the behaviors of the leaders actually shaped the behaviors of their staff, which in turn shaped outcomes. And in particular, that particular body of research looks at this thing of transformational versus transactional leadership. And transformational leadership, in particular the two dimensions that they focused on, intellectual stimulation. One of the attributes of a leader who does that, this is a leader who will say, listen, I have a target for you, and I want you to come up with a way to reach that target. Now, what's interesting here is the leader, what they're doing is they're identifying the goal, but they're not identifying the process. All right? And they're giving leeway to the employees or the staff or whoever to actually identify the process. So you might go out and you might come up with a proposal for me. And I will come back and I will say, that's a great idea. Now, I want you to come up with 5 reasons why this proposal won't work. Right? And in essence, what I'm trying to have you do is to reframe the problem. And what we find is that when you have leaders who are comfortable doing that, it tends to generate more ideas, but also gets greater buy-in from the staff around the actual implementation of that idea. Now that seems like a very simple type of thing to do, but let's put that in the context of reality. So if I have a leader who's been given some resources to actually launch a product, the second thing they're told after they're told how much money they have is what? The deadline for when to have it happen. And so it is very common, and we have some very interesting, say, myths or perversions about what we think effective leadership is can you hit the deadline, which is all about efficiency, or how quickly can you do something. And inspirational, intellectual stimulation is not about efficiency, because having an employee do something and go back and come up with reasons why that wasn't effective and really do some thought analysis around that, that's not efficient. But what it is effective. And so what you see is the leaders that are able to do that are able to sort of balance or keep in context these pressures associated with deadlines and other deliverables to create that space for innovation to happen. And I think that's a very interesting skill set. They frame problems in a different way. They tend to not be as focused on efficiency and far more on effectiveness. The other aspect of that study that came up was whether or not you can use inspirational motivation. And again, what this is trying to do is to get people to adopt the goal for the sake of the goal. So tackling the broader purpose as to why we're doing it. And it really is about trying to utilize the engagement or the commitment of your staff. And one reason why I think this is an effective mechanism is particularly if, I'm curious, how many of you represent organizations that have, as part of your product offering, services, where you provide services, all right? And what you find, particularly in Western or more older or more established organizations, is a growing trend for services to be a primary delivery mechanism for those organizations, the way in which they generate profit. And if you look at large economies, older large economies across the world, if you look at GDP, a growing amount of that gross domestic product is coming from service delivery. That is a very different game to play than manufacturing or product delivery. And a lot of what we know in HR is based on manufacturing or product type activities, not service delivery. And this is a very, I think, a fundamental shift. If an organization goes down that path, they are engaged in a fundamental shift. Because you make money or you are successful in services because of discretionary effort. Right? If you think about the best service experiences you've ever had in any type of setting, it was that person going over and beyond what their job description described. Right? They could have just, you go to a restaurant, you order something, they bring you exactly what you ordered, they sit it down, they don't say a word to you, they take your tray away when you're done, and you pay. And, that's the job description for a waiting staff. But if you think about the really good restaurants that you go to, what is that person doing? They remember who you are, they're talking to you about your preferences, they make you feel comfortable like it's in their house. That's not in a job description. That's discretionary effort. And what that organization is doing is they're making money or being successful because of that effort. So when you are able to engage in someone with inspirational motivation, to get them attached to that particular passion, the notion of service as developing a relationship, as opposed to service as a transaction, then you get a higher level of effort and you get the innovative behaviors that drive it. So those are the two distinctions, and that's different from, and again, it's a focus on effectiveness, because you could look at that wait staff and say, why are you talking to the customer so much? You're slowing us down. And you see managers who do this, but they don't appreciate that they are now in a service business as opposed to a product business. So that was the insight for that. Other questions that may come up from that we couldn't touch on earlier this morning. You know, my point that I was trying to make earlier was that when you are framing this perspective, first and foremost, you need to start with what's going on outside of you. And again, I don't know if we oftentimes in HR think about things that way, but all true growth opportunities happen because of changes in the external environment. So we need to be thinking about that. And whenever I work with the organization around these issues around how to develop an effective innovation agenda, the first question I might have as city manager sit down and think about is, what are the major shocks that have happened to you in the last 3 years? What are they? And it's really amazing because we get so caught up in what's going on right now. Everything that's going on right now is really important. Right? In your life, everything that's going on right now in your job is really important. I'm not making any light of that. But it is amazing if you go back and look at the agenda items for your meetings that you had 3 years ago, which 3 years ago all those things were really important, how most of them you don't even think about anymore. As important as they were 3 years ago, they're completely irrelevant right now. And you know what? 3 years from now, it'll be the same way. But because we sort of get into a firefighting mode, we actually are not able to take the time to reflect on what's going on and really thinking about, you know, what are the external shocks that have happened, because whether you like them or not, those are the opportunities for your organization. You don't get to pick the playground. You just get to pick whether or not you want to play in it. And so that's the first question I ask. And you might even think about writing that down and making note of that for you. Like, what are the big shocks that are happening? Not HR issues. I'm not talking about HR issues here. I'm not talking about competencies or hiring or any of that stuff. I'm talking about the things that are happening around you. What does it mean to have mass social change in terms of political environment? What does it mean to have technological change for the product offerings that you have? What does technology do for whether or not your products are viable in the future? These are the things that your customers are experiencing, and as a result, you will experience. Long before we talk about it from an HR perspective, we can just think about it from a business perspective. Second question I would often ask is, so what are your customers? Given that this change has happened, what does this mean for your customers? You're going to get a new set of customers, and you're going to get an old set of customers. I was working with a company that provided, in essence, telephone books. That's what they provided. And they were very profitable in doing it. They got roughly 75% of their revenue from telephone books. Now, what's the problem with getting 75% of your revenue from telephone books? Well, I mean, when was the last time any of you used a telephone book? You don't use it anymore. So despite the fact that it's extremely profitable for me today, the advent of the smartphone has pretty much made that competency irrelevant. And they were putting more and more money and more energy into becoming effective at selling advertisement and telephone books, and they were becoming less and less and less relevant. And unfortunately, they were not prepared to be dealing with digital technology. And it wasn't because they didn't appreciate it, it just was, when do I have the time to deal with that? I got to go sell these telephone books. And this was a big problem. And so when we work with them, we sort of ask them, who are your customers? Now and in the future. And one of the realizations that somebody pointed out, and it doesn't sound like it's overly complicated, but the realization was that everyone who was under the age of 25, none of them had probably ever used a telephone book. Like, my children don't know what a telephone book is. It's just like a big water paper they can color on. They will never use this thing. The whole brand of the company was associated with the fact they had a telephone book in every house. Not one person under 25 was ever going to touch this thing. And then they begin to ask themselves, well, if that's our customers, what do they want? And immediately, oh, young people, I said, no, this isn't about young people, because old people don't want to carry around telephone books either. And so just thinking about what will they like? One of the ideas about a telephone book is I go into it and I have an idea of what I'm looking for. But you think about how we can use information technology now. What is the beauty of Facebook and Google? It actually tells you what to look for. Like you log on and all of a sudden things that you didn't know you wanted appear in front of you. Like the technology, listen, appreciate it. White pages, telephone books are technology. Like before they existed, it was problematic. You didn't know how to call someone. They solved the problem. But it was based upon an idea that they could provide us. The customer would be seeking information and be very specific about it. My children are not that way. They're not necessarily seeking, they're entertaining options. Right? That's how they view the world. They're entertaining options. And so, we have to ask them, if your customers are buying options, and you are providing predetermined solutions, will they talk to you? No. So an external shock happened. And what was that external shock? It became really cheap to buy really fast computers that you can walk around with in your pocket. That was the shock. And nobody saw that coming, because 20 years ago, if you had told somebody that was going to happen, impossible. Right? 10 years ago, possible, but masses can't control it. The definite 25-year-olds aren't going to be able to afford it. Today, they give you the phone because they make the money on the service. So, what does the customer really want? And I think that really forces, because when you ask that question, you find people really become concerned because the customer may want something that you just can't do. And that's important to appreciate. And I think the last question is, all right, what are you willing to do to make that happen? And again, nowhere in here is this an HR conversation. This is a business strategy conversation. And I like it that way because I don't think many executives appreciate how important HR is to them. And once you begin to analyze problems from this perspective, you begin to see how important the HR skill set is, because the answer to this question begins to shape who you hire, who they know, all this other type of stuff. What do you guys think? What are some of the shocks that you've experienced in your company? I'd be just curious if I can indulge the audience. Somebody want to share just what are some of the shocks your companies have dealt with over the last 3 years? Yes.
Just from Saudi Aramco, demand will be the trade.
Demand for trade.
Yes. Earlier we were only dealing with Saudi Aramco as a company. Now we have a lot of joint ventures and they need our services.
Yeah. So you've had changes in demand. Now I don't know a lot about your business, but I would imagine 10 years ago the percentage of business that you did in China was much lower than it is now. And so you've had a shift in the type of who your customers actually are, and what they want, how you can get it to them, and a change in preference. What are some other shocks that you've had? Any other examples of shocks that have occurred? I mean, again, not HR issues, like just things that are happening in the broader environment that support your organization. What are the types of things that your organizations are seeing? Yes, please.
I run a training company, and there was no training budget anymore.
GFC happens. Next thing you know, there's no budget for training. Yeah, and what is the relationship between GFC and training? Well, I mean, training didn't cause the GFC. Well, maybe lack of training might have caused the GFC if you think about what was going on in Wall Street. But so how do you actually deal with it? So now the interesting thing is, who are your customers? People who want to get smarter but can't pay. Like, okay, how do you do that? Like, that's crying for innovation, isn't it? Well, what it is they can't pay as much as they used to. They need fewer amount of time to get the same amount of knowledge. Maybe there's a little bit more instrumentality around what knowledge they need. Your customer base changed. And those organizations that were set up to provide very short, succinct training in an information technology heavy way, which was cheaper to deliver, they're like, yes, Low budgets means we get higher market share. Those organizations that were not set up that way, this is a problem for them. So, this is how I view the world. Honestly, I'm pretty methodical in my perspective on things. In any organization, whenever I'm talking to someone about what they do, I just break it down like this. What are your tasks? What are the things that are happening in the external environment? I know you need innovation. And for me, HR is really 5 questions. We just ask them over and over again in more or less sophisticated ways.